Andre was a bit of a handful as a child, actually. He was quite hyperactive. He had so much energy, he didn't really know what to do with it. And the only thing I found that I could get him involved in that kept him quiet was football. So I put him in as much football as possible. He wasn't very good to start off with, but he had the determination. So he used to follow the coach up and down the pitch and kept like tugging at him. Can I go on now? Can I go on now? And eventually he earned his place on the team, and he never stopped. And that was the only way really that I could get him to get rid of all the energy that he had so that he'd go home and have a good night's sleep. He was also very kind and caring. So if you look at Andre's friendship groups, the people that he was friends with, they were so vast. He was friends with what we'd call the school geeks. He'd be friends with the bad boys. He'd be friends with the footballers and the athletes. He'd be friends with the girls. He became quite a bit of an agony aunt, and he just was able to be so diverse. He could just switch between groups and show kindness to everybody. It was an all day. We got up in the morning. We were all at home laughing, fighting, playing around. And then my sister-in-law said we could come down and visit her. So we decided that we'd leave out about 5 o'clock, 5:30, and drive back down to Croydon, because at the time we were living in Kent. We drove down, and on the way down, my son received a few phone calls from his friends. And because we'd been out of the area for about 4 weeks, he was quite keen to see them and get a chance to hang out whenever he could. So he asked me to drop him to the Monks Hill estate. I didn't really want him to go there because I just had this feeling that that's not where we needed to be right now. But he was quite insistent. Oh, Mum, come on, I'll be all right. Just drop me off. So I gave in. I dropped him to the estate, which was quite weird, really, when I think about it now, because my other two little ones didn't even ask to get out of the car. They just jumped into the front and said, OK, let's go to Auntie's now. So I said to him, I love you, be safe, and I'm leaving you with a heavy heart, because I kind of knew that I just had this motherly feeling. And we made our way to my sister-in-law's. And when we got there, I connected to her Wi-Fi because I was having phone problems, and straight away I got a WhatsApp call, and it was from one of my son's friend's mums who lives on the estate, and she was really panicked, and it kind of scared me to the point where I didn't even wait for her to say anything. I kind of started to put my shoes on, and she said, somebody's been stabbed. And I said, who is it? And she said, I don't know, but they're saying that it's Andre. And I said to her, please just go and have a look and tell me. And she said, I can't. And I was like begging her, please just go and see. So she did, and she didn't respond. She just started screaming. And I jumped in the car and drove down to the estate. And that's where I saw all the people and the ambulances and the air ambulance and the tape, and I just ran. I just got out of the car and ran the whole length of the street, but I wasn't able to go near him. And I followed into St George's in the ambulance, and I was there waiting for some news. But inside my heart, I kind of knew that he wasn't going to make it. I just knew the way I was feeling. I just knew that it wasn't going to be good news. So when the doctor finally came and said she wanted to explain to us what his injuries were, I just said to her, just tell me, is he gone? And she said yes. And I just collapsed on the floor. And that was it. Okay, there was a few incidents over a period of about a year which were a bit tit for tat and a bit minor. It started over my son defending a friend of his that was dating one of the boys that is now being convicted of manslaughter. They were in quite a rough relationship, a violent relationship, and my son wanted to protect her and defend her. And from that, it kind of grew into something a bit bigger, a bit of a tit for tat. But in the last month, so from the 16th of July, there had been a shooting where my son's car had been shot at when he was inside his friend's car. Then some of the people came to my house and smashed all my windows. Then there was another drive-by shooting, And that's when I decided I needed to leave the area that we lived in. So we moved away. So it was definitely all fueled from that. I wasn't really sure why it had kind of got so out of control. But I found out later that one of the boys had been stabbed and had presumed that it had been something to do with one of my sons and his friends. So they decided to take revenge, and that's why he ended up dead. So I didn't really know what to expect when I was going to go to court. And when we finally got the date and we went to court for the trial, it was quite difficult because the 4 defendants were sitting so close to us. It was literally a couple of, like, a metre away. So we was looking at them, I was looking at them, sitting next to them every single day for three months, and watching them laughing and having their normal conversations and blowing kisses to their parents and making remarks such as, "I'll see you soon, Mum, I'll be home soon," knowing that my own child's not going to come home. And also, that's when you really hear what actually happened, what evidence the police gathered, because up until that point, I didn't know anything because I was down as a witness. So the first time you go there and you get given a book, there's lots of books to look at which is filled with evidence. And the first book that I looked at was a body mapping book, and it basically had what they said was not a picture of Andre's body, but I knew it was because he's my son and I know what his body looked like. And it had every single stab wound, every single strike that he took with the pole. Every one was a photograph imposed onto the body. And looking at those so deeply, for the first time really realising what he actually went through on that day. It was hard because we were not separate from the families either. We were going out to lunch to the same places and standing outside the courtroom together and, you know, hearing their conversations about, you know, how unjust they thought it was, or, you know, what they wanted their result to be, obviously to have their children back home, knowing that that's just not going to be the result for me. It didn't really matter what result came out, it wasn't going to be that one. From the evidence that was heard in court, and there was so many eyewitnesses, there was over 20 eyewitnesses that witnessed the attack, and they were all situated in different places, so the police were able to piece together what they had seen to make the full story. And it started with my son being outside the spa, and he was standing there waiting for his friends, and you see the car pull up and they jump out, the boys jumped out armed. So one had a great big kitchen knife and one had a pole, and you see him start to run and they take chase of him. So that's 2 on foot and the vehicle which has 2 other boys in it. As he turned the corner and went down the alleyway, we don't really know where he sustained all of the injuries, but by the time he was on the grass, where he was later found, one of the witnesses said that she saw one of the boys holding a gun to his head and saying, "You deserve this," and he was already unconscious, and they were kicking him in his head like it was a football, and he was just spinning around and around and around on the floor. So the final witness that spoke, who came down to initially give him aid, the barrister at the trial said to her, how did she, because she referred to the knives being big, and he said to her, how did you know the knives were big, because you never saw anybody with a knife? And her response was, I didn't need to see anybody with a knife, I saw the hole that was in Andre's body. And basically what she was referring to was she was trying to put bandages on to stop the bleeding, but she said she actually just rolled them up into balls and pushed them in the holes. So the injuries that he sustained, he had about 12 stab wounds to the left side, which kind of insinuates that he was curled up in a ball trying to protect his body, but they all went on down his left side. So one went straight through his arm and came out the other side, so his arm was literally hanging off. and then he had quite a few to his left side, in his back by where his spine was, and then down into his legs. He had 3 stab wounds in his head, and he had 3 pole marks, 1 to the back of his head and 2 across the side of his face. Okay, so the outcome was 3 on the day of when the verdicts were given. The head juror that stood up to say what the outcomes were, the first person that was the verdict came for was Fabio Femisella, and he said not guilty. So straight away my breath I just lost my breath because I couldn't understand that. He was Andre's friend. He was the one that the problem started over. He was the main instigator in the whole problems that they were having. And he got not guilty for murder. And then they asked for the lesser charge of manslaughter, and then they said guilty for manslaughter. So everybody kind of felt like everybody was going to get the same result. And then next was Ali Zahawi, and he got found guilty of murder and was finally sentenced to 22 years. And then Rodney Mukasa got 22 years as well for murder, and they couldn't reach a verdict for the 4th person, Jamal Lonigan, so it was set for a retrial. He decided not to do a retrial. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, so he got 10 years. Before Andre died, we had to leave our home. So we went through a process of having a good clear out. We got rid of all our things. We just kept the things that we wanted to keep, and we moved far away. And then as soon as he had died, we obviously couldn't do the travelling backwards and forwards because it was 45 miles away. And me and my younger 2 children, we just ended up crashing at people's houses for about 2 weeks. And then we finally moved back to South London so that we could deal with the court case and the trial and everything else that was going on. So we've moved home 5 times. And that in itself has been very, very difficult. People don't want to move home once a year, let alone move 5 times in 1 year. Also, it takes away your memories, because we have no memories of a house that we lived in as a family. That's kind of gone. Then there's the impact of working. I couldn't work for a year. I just physically couldn't manage to go to work, plus everything else that is going on with the trial and dealing with the police and everything else. So that kind of took over everything. My boys have found it very difficult because everything's changed in the home. They used to have an older brother, and now they don't have that older brother. So my middle son has now had to step up and is trying to be the older brother, but doesn't really know how to do that. And the little one has been subjected to so many things, like the information that he's heard and news and newspaper clippings and conversations that other people have had around him. He's been very terrified and scared to do anything, such as even going to the toilet in his own home. So having to deal with all of those things as well, and then trying to deal with your grief on top of that, is very, very difficult. Planning a funeral, trying to hold yourself together every single day and go out with your head held high and trying to just live normal, even though normal doesn't really exist anymore. And we all have our turns of breaking down. You know, some people say to me, "Oh, you're so strong, you've just got on," but sometimes I lay in bed at night and I have to remind myself that he's actually dead, because I don't actually sometimes believe that it's actually happened to us or he's not here, you know, just thinking that he's going to come to the door and say, where have you lot moved to again? You know, like we've lost him along the way somewhere and he's going to come and find us. So it's been extremely difficult trying to be strong and supportive for the younger children and grandparents, aunties, uncles, and being strong for everybody, but just feeling so weak and lost inside. It's really hard. It's a really hard thing to try and describe. It's so painful, like a pain that you've never, ever felt before. I think they think it's a game. This isn't GTA. This isn't, you know, a driving around game where you jump out of your vehicle and you shoot and kill people and the game ends and you get your lives back. It's not like that. We're not going to get our life back. I'm not going to get Andre's life back. My life's never going to go back to the way it was. My children have got to live with this for the rest of their lives, and probably, you know, we're all going to take that to our graves with us, the pain that we're feeling. It's not a game. It destroys people's lives. You know, it's a ripple effect. It's not just about the argument or the problem that you have with somebody because you can't get along. You know, it's the parents, it's the siblings, it's the aunties, uncles, the cousins, it's everybody's, the community. We're all feeling it, the loss of one person because you can't sort your problems out. It's ridiculous over stupidness because nobody's really got a reason. When those boys sat in court and they asked them to describe their relationship with Andre and what the problem was, they described my son as being a gentleman. You know, oh no, he was a bit of a gentleman, you know, he's honourable, he stood up for a girl. So did you like him? Yeah, he was all right. But yet they can take somebody's life away. There's no real reason for it. It's all pathetic. And they need to start valuing their lives, because it's okay taking somebody else's life, but now you've got to think about how you're going to spend the rest of your life. Are you going to spend the rest of your 22 years, 25 years, 26 years locked up? You've just taken your own life as well.